Good evening, everyone. I am Lieutenant Shane Foley from the IMPD Public Affairs Office. I want to welcome everybody to the third of 6 district virtual community meetings. Tonight we're out at East District with Commander Rick Riddle. We want to use these as an opportunity for our district commanders to engage with the citizens in their respective districts, and also an opportunity for you as the citizens to ask questions. If you do have questions for Commander Riddle, I encourage you to put those in the chat box here on the WebEx forum, or you can go to Facebook and send them via Facebook, and then we will be asking Commander Riddle as many questions as we can. As we've done before, we want to keep these to an hour. We want to respect everybody's time. So with that being said, I'd like to pass this off to Commander Rick Riddle. Commander?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you, sir, for introduction. Is this coming through okay? All right. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to East District. Once again, my name is Richard Riddle. I am the commander on East District for IMPD. Tonight, I'm going to give you just a kind of a brief overview of 2020 and then look forward to 2021 and let everybody know what we're doing out here on East District. So our agenda tonight, like I said, just a quick overview of East District, jump into some 2020 crime stats, look at kind of where we were, how we ended up for the year, look at our 2021 priorities and initiatives, and last but not least, a little question and answer session. So here we go. So this is the new beat map for IMPD East District. It didn't change much, but we did have a slight change in district boundaries from July 13th of last year to today. So if you take a look at the map in the lower left-hand side by where you see ED10, that actually bumps up against downtown. And I-65, I-70 as it cuts through the middle of our city. As it goes up and north, that's Massachusetts Avenue until it reaches Emerson, and then Emerson north to about 56th Street. We continue east all the way to the county line on the east side between Hancock County and Marion County, and we go as far south as Brookville Road on the south side. So East District encompasses a lot of square mileage. However, we do have a very large, dense population, not only just east of our downtown core, but out in our East District 51, 52, 53 beat areas that I'll go into here in a little bit. One of the things that I do want to talk about is something that I'm trying to put down and tamp down as the stigma of the East Side. Too many times, my previous role as the PIO for IMPD, we have a new PIO, Lieutenant Shane Foley, who you just heard from. I'm sure he will experience this too, but the media likes to use the word East Side for a lot of crime trends and a lot of crimes across our city. And I don't think that's fair, because while we have our fair share of crime on the East Side or on East District, that term can have some stigma attached when every time you hear of crime occurring, it's generically used at East Side. So a couple of quotes that I've heard before that seem to get underneath my skin is violence seems to always occur on the East Side. Don't go to the East Side after dark. Oh, you work on the East Side, you must see a lot of violence. Truth be told, we have violence. I'm not afraid to admit that. However, just like other parts across our city, we have pockets of great areas on East District. We have great people that work, live, and raise a family on the East Side. But we also have our challenge areas. So that's some of the areas that we like to focus our attention on. So what are some of the effects of this stereotype? I mean, obviously, there is a perception of the quality of life on the East Side. There's a perception of the neighborhoods on the East Side. There's this perception that there is a decline in economic investment on the East Side. And lastly, there's a reduction in property value as a result of some of this stigma. So what are we looking to do? we're looking to increase the quality of life here on East District. Some of the things that we're going to do to try to do that, I'll get to later in this presentation as I talk about some of our initiatives for 2021. But we are looking to increase the quality of life. We're looking to increase safety in our communities. Nobody wants to raise a family, and nobody wants their children to live in a community where they don't feel safe. So that's clearly a priority on East District for us, is to increase the safety in our communities. Obviously, increased or improved economic investments across East District. That goes without saying that we need business, we need investment, and we need improvements in these communities out here for a safer community and better quality of life. Those investments will obviously improve our tax base. With an improved tax base, that gets the infrastructure, that is so desperately needed in some of these neighborhoods. If you think about some of the problems on the east side, one of the big things we talk about is sidewalks or lack thereof. So that investment leads to that tax base, which allows us to work within city government to get some of that infrastructure improvement here on the east side. And last but not least, for anybody that's living on the east side, everybody wants improved property values. It goes without saying that property values are a very important economic tool. It goes into the quality of life, and it goes into our safety of our community. So that's just an overarching view of some of the things that go through my head on a daily basis. If we're hitting our marks out here on the east side, if we're improving that quality of life, if we're improving the safety in our communities, we're improving that safety, will it lead to economic investment? How will that affect our tax base? How can we improve infrastructure? And last but not least, like I said, how can we, as an agency and the police department, help with the property values across the east side of Indianapolis? So next, I'll jump into some statistics that we saw out here on East District for 2020. Unfortunately, we had a very violent year across East District and across this city. Total in 2020, we had 241 murders across IMPD's jurisdiction. That is just absolutely tragic and absolutely devastating to families. So here on East District alone, on paper, we had 81 murders, and that accounted for 38% of all the murders on IMPD's jurisdiction occurred on East District. As far as our non-fatal shootings are concerned, we had 239 incidents of non-fatal shootings across East District, and that represented 36% of all the non-fatals on IMPD's jurisdiction. Those numbers are very high, and those numbers are unacceptable in our community. But what I can say is, looking historically over the past 7 years, the percentages have not changed, even though the number of occurrences have risen. Traditionally speaking, the murders on East District alone account for about 35 to 38% of all murders across IMPD. And the non-fatal shootings, since we've been tracking those, again, account for around 35 to 40% of all non-fatal shootings happen on East District. Like I mentioned earlier, the district boundaries were changed on July 13th of 2020. So any crime that occurred previous to July 13th of 2020 for the calendar year 2020 is reported for the respective district in which that crime occurred on, as effective as December 31st. So you're probably asking yourself, Rick, what are you meaning? So had a little typo there, I apologize. So the district boundaries that were in effect on December 31st of 2020 showed that East District had 81 murders. I had a little typo. Sometimes I get fat fingers and I type a little too fast. So we had 81 murders here on East District alone. Like I said, that number is absolutely out of control and unacceptable. However, if we would have kept the same boundaries on IMPD East District as we had previously in the year, we would have only had 64 murders across East District. So we picked up some areas in July that had a little more violence, and those numbers then came to East District. So when I talked earlier about the stigma of crime on the East Side and the stigma of living on the East Side, this is what I'm talking about, is when it boils down to numbers, numbers matter, lives matter, and it's something that we take very, very serious on East District is some of the violence. IMPD East District was not immune from violence. Obviously, as everybody remembers, on April 9th of 2020, our own officer, Breanne Leith, was the 46th murder on IMPD's jurisdiction last year. Without going too deep into the incident, I happened to be there that day. Very, very, very tragic incident in which Officer Leith responded to a domestic disturbance, and she was shot as she arrived at this. So here on East District, we are not immune to the violence that we've seen across this district, and it hits home for us this year. So the takeaway, we obviously miss Breanne. We wish her family well. We wish her son Zane well. But the takeaway from this is, for the officers on East District, they saw front and center how this violence not only affected them, but affected Breanne's family. And my hope is that they take some of those feelings and they change that, and they show a little more empathy as we investigate the violence across East District moving forward. So rest in peace, Breanne. We're coming up on your 1-year anniversary, and we've got some things in store for that 1-year anniversary, so stay tuned for that. All right, this next slide is a little stretched out, but all the triangles you see is the location of a non-fatal shooting, and all the red stars are the locations for a murder that occurred on East District last year. So what I look for and what my team looks for are clusters of triangles and stars to see where we need to focus and we need to shift our resources across this district. And it becomes very clear when it comes time to shift priorities and shift resources where we need to dedicate our officers. And that's one of the big things that I get asked as the commander of East District in the community is, why do you have a number of officers in this location as opposed to this location? Or why do all the officers seem to be concentrated around 10th and Rural or 38th and Post and not out in my neighborhood on the far east side or out by Brookville Road? And this is some of the statistics and some of the data that I use as the East District commander to place my resources and our priorities for keeping our communities and our residents safe. So as you can see, there's a cluster of stars and triangles up there around ED51 and ED52. Those are 2 different beats, and that is right there at 38th and Post. The second set of clusters that you see right down there is in towards the bottom left-hand side where it says ED41. That is beat 41. That is bound by Sherman on the west, 10th Street to the north, Linwood on the east, and Washington Street to the south. That zone experienced a very, very large increase in violence last year. And that has obviously caught our attention, and we're shifting priorities and shifting our focus to that area. That area saw one of the more tragic homicides of last year. It was the postal carrier, as she was out doing her job and delivering mail to our community, and she was tragically shot as she was doing her job. Again, I was there at that scene. Very, very, very sad for that community. Last but not least, you'll see a cluster around the ED14, ED12, ED13 area. That's that 10th and Rural area. We've had some recent success in that area of crime reduction. However, that remains a priority and a hot spot for East District. So I'll get into that a little bit later in our presentation, but I wanted to show another map. This is some of the things that we look at across the city, is what's called our hotspot map. And the brighter the map or the deeper the color, the more non-fatal shootings and more gun violence that they've had in that particular area. The reason why I highlight this particular map citywide is if you can imagine a satellite view from space and you look at communities that shine bright, such as New York or Chicago or LA or even Indianapolis, you know that the brighter that light is, the more people and the bigger city that is. This map is no different in the sense of the darker red that you see, the more violence we have seen in those particular areas. So again, for East District, as you can see on the far right portion of your screen, that area that shows brown, that's right there around 38th and Post. That was the location where we had the 4 homicides of the young teenagers early last year in January, the tragic murders of those 4 young individuals. We also had the explosion of violence, like I said in that previous slide, there in our beat 41. That's represented by that a little bit larger brown. I don't know if my cursor will show it, but that's that beat 41. I think I can do it over here if everybody can see that. And then last but not least, here is another hotspot. I don't want to cast shade on any of my other colleagues on any other districts, but you can certainly see that there are other pockets of hotspots throughout the city of Indianapolis, and those are our priorities across IMPD. We've been tasked as commanders to look at these hotspots, shift priorities, shift resources to these locations so we can tamp down some of that gun violence. So like I said earlier about the stigma of East Side and the liberal use of the East Side as dangerous, not only in the media, but on social media. I do my best to try to decrease that stigma, just to show that we do have pockets of violence in other parts of our city as well. So on East District, these are the year-end statistics that we had last year. I can tell you this, if you were to poll commanders across the United States and you said, hey, if I could tell you that you had a 10% reduction in crime from one year to the next, would you consider that a success? Having contacts across the nation, I can tell you that most individuals in my seat would tell you they would love to have a 10% reduction of overall crime in their district or their jurisdiction. However, this quite isn't good enough for me. If you take a look at this statistic, you'll see that while, yes, we had an overall 10% reduction in crime, our rates of murder was increasingly high. The non-fatal shootings, which contributed to a slight uptick in the percentage of aggravated assaults, which led to a net reduction of 0.78% in overall violent crime as required to be reported by the FBI for our year-end UCR stats. That was overshadowed by the 16% reduction that we had in property crime. I know some of that was attributed to COVID and more people being at home, so some of our property crime went down. But quite frankly, looking at 2021, we can do better not only on East District, but all across this city to drive further reductions in crime. So how are we doing in 2021 so far? This is the most recent statistic that I got for East District. We're down about 13% overall, not only on violent crime, but in property crimes as well. Unfortunately, that criminal homicide number has crept up as of last night. We had a criminal homicide investigation that occurred at 21st and Post last night. Several of you may have seen that on the media, so that number is actually up by 1, which brings that overall reduction down a little bit in violent crime. So not bad, obviously, for the first portion of the month. We get a little bit of luck from the weather when it comes to property crimes, especially in cold waves, like we've seen this week and we anticipate next week. And obviously, as the temperature increases and more people come out of their homes, we will traditionally see a rise in some of these crime statistics. Wanted to give a little bit of comparison to the hotspot mapping that we saw earlier. This is the 2021 hotspot map. So some of the same areas that we have seen some problems in, we continue to see on East District. So we're doing our best to address those as they occur and doing anything that we can to preventatively address those and get some of these crime rates and some of this violence down in some of these neighborhoods. If my cursor shows, I don't know if it will. Again, we still have a hot pocket of violence up here around 38th and Post. We've seen a slight uptick over here by roll call. Right here is where Washington and 465 come together on this particular map. We had a homicide not too far from roll call, and we actually had an employee of the Papa John's just over here outside of our roll call that was shot earlier in January, which just is an absolute senseless crime. So that hotspot's creeping up a little bit close to our district headquarters. Our East District 41 hotspot that I talked about earlier, we're still seeing some crime and some violent crime occur in that area. We had a non-fatal shooting in that area. However, if you notice our 10th and rural area, which is represented over here, we've seen some reductions in crime based upon some of the strategies we've employed over there. So we're looking at what's working over there and see if we can replicate some of those strategies across the district. Strictly for demonstrative purposes, most people know that we had a very tragic family shooting that took the lives of 6 individuals in one household a few weeks back. That area is shown up here. So just to give a little perspective of what a heat map will look like when you have a very sudden, intense infusion of violence in one particular area, that particular area will glow, if you will, a little darker red. So that's indicative of that. That's nothing that my colleagues on North District have done wrong. In fact, that they've done everything right as a follow-up to that. That was just a very, very senseless, tragic act that our detectives and those officers did a fantastic job of getting that crime solved very quickly and bringing some relief and sense of security for that neighborhood. So great job by North District. All right, so I want to jump into what we call the East District way on how we address crime and how we address our strategies here on East District. Every day starts with intelligence-led policing. And I got this from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, but they define intelligence-led policing, or ILP, is an executive implementation of the intelligence cycle to support proactive decision-making for resource allocation and crime prevention. In order to successfully implement this business process, police executives must have clearly defined priorities as part of their policing strategy. So how do we employ intelligence-led policing on East District? Here's what we do. So every day, I get a daily crime report that is distributed not only to East District, but to key personnel throughout the department. That is compiled by my East District Strategic Intelligence Officer. You may hear me refer to that as an SIO, and the Neighborhood Impact Lieutenant. These two individuals do an absolutely phenomenal job every day of looking at every police report, every violent crime that occurs on East District, and they're looking for suspects. They're looking at the victimology. They're looking at the behaviors that went into that crime being committed and how we can best address that particular act on East District to either take that suspect into custody or to follow up as the detectives work that case, and how we can provide a sense of relief for that community. So based upon that DCR is a daily patrol plan is produced every single day that looks at emerging crime trends throughout our district. And this leads to targeted enforcement of people, places, and behavior. When I first came on IPD back in late 1999 and the early 2000s, we were all about flooding an area, pulling over cars, writing traffic tickets, arresting people, and putting people in jail. And you've heard Chief Roach talk about this before, and it's true, or former Chief Roach, excuse me. Former Chief Roach talks about this is what we thought the community wanted of their police department, is to put people in jail for those individuals that are out committing crimes in the neighborhood. And that's how we had an effective crime strategy back in the day. But what we have learned that is we can do a really good job of flooding an area with a lot of police officers. We can make an intense amount of traffic stops. We can stop people walking up and down the streets. And quite frankly, that discourages not only the relationships we have with people in the community, but it can actually turn against us as we're stopping people that are just simply going to and from work, trying to make a living, trying to support their family. So what we're trying to do on East District is be very targeted and very specific in the individuals that we are going after on a daily basis. So how does that work? So that intelligence-led policing leads to that daily crime report, that DCR that you see at the top of the list. With that DCR leads to a patrol plan. Within that patrol plan leads to what we call BOLOs, or be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for this car, be on the lookout for this individual that may have committed this crime. Be on the lookout for these known individuals that live in this area that we know have committed crimes in the past. Be on the lookout for individuals that are on probation or parole in these particular areas that may have an increase in robbery. We look at that information as we go about our daily business here on East District. That intelligence-led policing and that patrol plan also looks at crime trends. Hey, if an area has had an increase in shots fired, more than likely that could lead to a non-fatal shooting or a murder. So we need to direct our resources to figure out exactly why we're having a problem with non-fatal shootings or shots fired in that area, which ultimately in the end leads to officer safety. The more information that we can get to our officers on a daily basis on the individuals that are dangerous, gun carrying, illegal gun carrying members of this community, the safer our officers are and the safer our communities can be. So it is a very round process that works every single day. So very, very early in the morning, these two individuals wake up. They look at all the crime runs, they look at every single police report, and they put together a plan for the working day for our officers to go out and target gun violence and active criminals in this community and in our neighborhoods. So I redacted a lot out of this, but this is an actual patrol plan that was issued just the other day. I took out names, I took out some key phrases that may tip off to some active things that we have going. But this is broken down by zone, and these are some of the areas that we're having our officers focus in on. And it provides them very, very timely intelligence that should lead to very, very timely action by officers in our police department. So this is information that we send out on a daily basis. This is constantly updated, constantly improved upon, and constantly fed new information to our officers, so we ensure that we have our officers in the right areas to constantly try to tamp down on the violence that we have seen on East District. So what are some of the ways that we are doing that? I talked earlier about that heat map, and we can generate our hotspots. So we do hotspot policing. Like I said, 38th and Post has been a hotspot for us. 10th and Rural area has been a hotspot for us. And that East District, that Beat 41, just east of Sherman over there between Washington and 10th Street, has been a hotspot for us. I put on here Police Foundation study. This is a definition of hotspot policing by the Police Foundation. They actually came in and did a study of IMPD over the summer on our procedural justice component of our policing. And they have found that usually hotspot policing works. However, aggressive hotspot tactics could have long-term negative effects on legitimacy perceptions, which are key to democratic policing and have been linked to citizen compliance with the law. That's what I said earlier. When I first came on, we thought we knew what hotspot policing should look like, so we flooded that area. What we have since learned is some of those long-term negative effects, the negative perceptions, and the negative feelings towards policing, but specifically IMPD, has crept up over time, and we're trying to do our best on East District to make sure we're not doing that. So I talked about our hotspots here on East District. Crime trends or displacement. We're also looking for displacement of crime. That does occur sometimes when you flood an area or you have an active area of police activity. That crime will actually shift, and we're trying to keep ahead of that curve to see where our displacement may occur so we can shift resources to that location. We also employ directed patrol. Obviously, that's high visibility patrols in known hotspots. We look to have our officers engage in enforcement activities to drive down that criminal activity when they observe it. But it also is a way to engage with community members and our business owners to ensure that they are safe, that they are feeling safe, that their quality of life is going up, and their perception of their safety in their community is on the way up too. So you will see active patrols by IMPD officers on East District on every beat and every zone throughout the district, specifically for this reason. Here's what we don't do on East District. We don't do stop and frisk. We don't do bias-based policing or profiling. I do not and I will not tolerate excessive force. Any overt excessive force by East District officers will be investigated, and it will be dealt with appropriately as our policy dictates. So that is not condoned on East District in any way, shape, or form, and neither is any unprofessional behavior or demeanor. Obviously, everybody knows that we now have body cameras. Our supervisors have been tasked with reviewing those body cams when necessary, and if any complaints come up, so we can immediately verify what has occurred or what has not occurred as alleged by a complainant. So I just wanted to publicly state what we will not be doing on East District as a way to drive up the legitimacy and that community relations that we're trying to get across here on East District with our community. So one of the biggest units that employs a lot of these tactics is my flex team. I can't say enough about the flex team. I can't say enough about the officers on East District in general. But last year with COVID, we asked our officers to be very protective of themselves to ensure that transmission of COVID did not occur during policing activities. But these individuals went out and they absolutely targeted the violent areas that we're seeing on East District, and they did a phenomenal job of patrolling the streets and going out and doing everything that we have asked them to do. So this team alone, I've got to count them up. I believe there are 7 of them now, and a sergeant. Last year alone, they had 165 arrests. They seized 103 illegal guns. I stress illegal guns taken off the streets. Obviously, a lot of the guns that they found were being possessed by felons, serious violent felons. And we had a lot of success referring some of those cases to the U.S. Attorney General's office to get federal prosecution on some of those career armed felons that are out there. This group served 34 search warrants. They had 32 arrest warrants that they served, and they seized $152,576 in U.S. currency. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but in a small unit at the district level, that is significant activity. So kudos, my hat's off to these individuals that work in this unit, and my hat's off to everybody on East District just for a job well done last year. Just a couple of pictures on some of the things that the Flex team took off the street. This picture right there in the middle, you'll see a little rifle handgun. The popular terminology right now is called a Draco. That's representative of what a Draco is. It is a pistol that has the capacity to shoot rifle rounds. Very deadly, very compact weapon that does a lot of damage on the streets. Some narcotics they took off the street, and then some things that were packaged as candy was actually THC and other illegal narcotics that they got during a federal search warrant. A few more pictures, just some of the guns and the currency and some of the drugs they took off the street last year. It's kind of scary to think that these are floating around the hands of felons, but unfortunately they are, and this group goes out there and targets these individuals that are possessing these weapons illegally. Just a few more slides and I'll jump into any questions that anybody may have. But what are the priorities here on East District for 2021? Obviously, a reduction in homicide and non-fatal shootings, that goes without saying. One of the things that I'm looking to do is work with city agencies to strengthen laws against illegal after-hour clubs across the district. We've seen an increase in pop-ups of after-hours clubs. A lot of that occurred during the COVID shutdown, and individuals would rent out warehouses or other business establishments that did not have the proper liquor license or licensing to host events. And we actually had 5 murders as a result last year on East District that I can directly attribute to an after-hours club. And we had several non-fatal shootings. So we eliminate those. We could potentially eliminate 3, 4, maybe even 5 homicides a year. Want our detectives to output to ensure case clearance and arrest improve. Obviously, our community, if you're victimized by a crime in your community, you expect the police department to investigate that, to do everything they can to bring charges. And if that's not possible, then there is an expectation for a detective or someone from the office to follow up with that victim to ensure them that we did everything we could for their individual case. Obviously, we want to continue to seize illegal firearms and continue referrals to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution. One of the biggest things, unfortunately, as a result of COVID that we could not do, the in-person meetings, the in-person coffee with a cop, the in-person opportunities for us as a police department to connect with our community, that obviously could not occur because of COVID. Our hope is with the vaccines that are coming online, the fact that a lot of our officers are getting the vaccine, a number of our members in our community are starting to get the vaccine. Our hope is those COVID numbers go down and we can start to have those face-to-face community meetings, those community engagement opportunities to increase the communication and the relationship between East District and the community we serve. And last but not least, I want, as the commander, our East District personnel to have details to other units within this agency. It only further develops them, makes them better police officers, makes them better people. That leads to promotional opportunities, that allows for interagency movement, that allows for people to try out detective units to see if that is a career path that they want to go down. And it's just very important for me that I ensure that we are giving our officers opportunities to advance their careers properly across the agency and across this district. 2 more slides, then we'll jump into question and answer. So what is the posture on East District this year? Obviously, we will have a continuation of the 3 primary patrol shifts. We have a day shift, we have a middle shift, and we have a late shift. That's assigned out here. Those are your traditional 911 takers. Those are the individuals that will show up and take a police report. Those will be the individuals that show up and make arrests on active scenes. So those primary patrol shifts will not be going away, obviously. Due to the success of the flex team and the fact that the East Side is experiencing higher violence than other districts, we are adding a late TAC flex team to ensure that we have individual and officers out that are specifically going after known violence and known offenders in our community and going after those individuals that are committing that violence, those trigger pullers, those individuals that are illegally possessing firearms. We're looking to transition a team in the evening to ensure that we have that coverage. Our narcotics unit, they're going to focus their efforts towards gun violence, violent offender tracking, and the nexus to the drug trade. So there are a number of narcotics complaints that come in to the districts. Our follow-up does not go away. However, those of us that have studied and looked at the violence that is occurring across the city, there is a definite nexus to the drug trade. And we need to get our narcotics unit involved in the violence side of this rather than strictly focusing on individuals that are possessing and simply dealing drugs. Because we know, like I said, there's a nexus to violence when it comes to the drug trade. So we're asking our narcotics unit to focus and step up their efforts towards targeting violent offenders. Our community resource unit, they're a great unit of officers that go out and do the public affairs side of this job for East District. We've asked them to follow up and continue to go out into our neighborhoods, especially after gun violence in these neighborhoods, to ensure that we are doing the follow-ups, we are talking to the community, and we are going out and we are making sure that the quality of life and people's perception of safety in their community is followed up on by this unit after violence, or just a visit to do a walkthrough of the neighborhood, or just to pass through to wave, hand out things to kids, and do that traditional community relations side that this unit just does so well. And last but not least, continuation of the detective unit. Our detective unit obviously investigates criminal activity, property crimes, burglaries, larcenies across the East District. Obviously, that will continue in 2021. And if manpower allows, I would like to add to that unit as well. So that's my presentation. I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to Lieutenant Foley for any questions that we may have, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Commander. First thing we had was a question about the specific boundaries of beat 41. So we went ahead and pulled up a specific beat map, not a question that you need to answer, but we wanted to provide that so people can see. On the west here is Sherman, the north boundary is 10th Street, the east boundary is Linwood, and the south boundary is Washington Street. So those are the boundaries for beat 41. That was one of the hotspot areas that Commander mentioned. So that was where it was a question of interest. What I'm going to do next is, as we ask some questions, I'm going to share with everyone some contact information for East District. So we'll ask the Commander some questions and share that contact information. As a reminder, if anybody has questions, feel free to ask those in the question answer box here on WebEx or on Facebook. Send us a message there. And this presentation will be posted on YouTube, so if you missed any part of it, or want to see the PowerPoint, you can always view it there afterwards. First question I want to ask, sir, is what can we as community members do to reduce crime on East District?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, one of the things that I always ask the community to do is actually be our eyes and ears when it comes to criminal activity. We cannot have a police officer on every street at all times. Although I would love to get that done, it's just simply impossible due to the square mileage of the district and the number of officers that we have. But if they know of active crime occurring, call 911. If it doesn't reach to the level where they think that it is an emergency or in progress run, call the non-emergency number 327-3811. Report that criminal activity to them. Obviously, there's Crime Stoppers, 262 tips. That information can be provided to Crime Stoppers anonymously, and that's information that we get here at the district level. And I say this every time I speak publicly about Crime Stoppers. I have been in the chief's office in my career. I've been very blessed. I've been in the PIO office. I'm now the district commander for East District. Never once have I seen complainant name, complainant address, phone number, IP address, or any identifying information of anyone that has provided information to Crime Stoppers. That is 100% anonymous. Any information that is given to Crime Stoppers that has an active address on East District is given to my neighborhood impact unit for follow-up. So if you don't want to call 911 and you're afraid of some of the things that are going on in the community, please follow up with Crime Stoppers with that information, and it will get to us at the district.
Can you talk a little bit about B-Link and how that impacts our community? And
yep, absolutely. So B-Link is a program that IMPD is expanding upon and is part of. B-Link allows individuals that have external cameras either on their businesses or on their residence to share that camera capability to IMPD. If a crime occurs and our detectives are out canvassing the neighborhood, if an individual is enrolled in B-Link, our detectives and our officers can then work with them behind the scenes to get that camera footage or that video that may help us solve a crime. So we actually are asking businesses and citizens to sign up at B-Link if they have a compatible system, or if they have questions on compatibility and what equipment to buy, there is an option for that as well. So we encourage that resource in our community to help us solve crimes.
Thanks, sir. The next question we had was, how do you balance hotspot policing with more proactive beat policing when you have limited resources?
Yeah, it's a great question. So hotspot policing, we obviously are focusing on. It takes nothing away from what our officers are trying to accomplish on a daily basis to sit in a vacant lot or to sit in a business lot and be active and be visible in that community, or to be visible in that particular area. You know, we are looking at ways to free up our officers' time. We are prioritizing to make sure our officers are following up on crime complaints in those hotspots. We're looking into online police reporting to allow our officers to have some more freed up time to focus on those hotspot policing. But obviously, from a directed patrol sense, when we talked about directed patrol and limited resources, I've actually asked our officers and our supervisors to make sure that officers are utilizing their free time to patrol actively in the neighborhoods, to go up and down alleys, to look in business lots, to check on business owners. So we're all clamoring for resources across IMPD and across the private sector too. But that does not take away from our responsibility to properly patrol and actively go out and protect our community.
Thanks, sir. This next one isn't a question, but I think it's important to share. We always appreciate positive feedback for our officers. Says thank you for your service, Commander Riddle and IMPD East. Everyone on the East Side Quality of Life Safety Community Action Team looks forward to working with you. So we appreciate that positive feedback, and we also look forward to working with members of our community as well. One question that you kind of addressed a little bit. We don't have I'm not sure if the percentages were, or we don't have some of them, but what is the percentage of increase in robberies? And robberies are actually down, to be clear. Catalytic converter thefts, and how are you addressing that? You kind of addressed that in this last question. You said patrolling the alleys, getting out of their cars, things like that. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add? Somebody said that DeQuincy has not seen foot patrols yet.
Yeah, I've talked with Counselor Larison about some of the issues on DeQuincy. So just know from a constituent basis, Counselor Larison has done a great job with following up with the concerns from the individuals on DeQuincy. As far as foot patrols, they are active, but I've asked our officers to be a little bit smarter in this cold weather, drive a little bit slower, be a little more visible in the neighborhoods. And as the warmer weather gets out and more people are out in their front yards and out in their communities, to actively engage in foot patrols then. Because foot patrols are useful, but in the cold weather, most people are just going to look at our officers from their window, from their warm house, and probably wave, which I appreciate. But the foot patrol aspect of what we've asked our officers to do is to engage with business owners and engage with community rather than just walking up and down the alley for a little bit of exercise. So I've asked our officers to increase the patrols in their vehicles while it's cold, and looking forward to the spring and hopefully some of the warmer weather that I hope we get sooner than later. I don't know that I believe Puxatawny Phil that we're going to have more winter, but you never know. But as soon as this weather warms up, I can assure you, you'll see more officers out on foot and bike across the area.
And Commander, one of the things I noticed from my time out on East District and meeting with community groups is people say, well, we don't see the police. Well, we can't be everywhere all the time. But certainly as we drive by, unless somebody's sitting out on their porch all day, they may not actually see the officers. We realize that they want to see the police and we want to be seen, but just because people don't see us doesn't necessarily mean that we're not there.
Yeah, I'll actually add to that. I appreciate you bringing that up. So, a lot of the times what people are looking for is the visibility and the police presence in their neighborhood. What we never really discuss is what's going on behind the scenes and some of the covert activity that we have. Just a week and a half ago, one of my undercover officers was driving back to roll call and was engaged in a shooting because an individual pulled up and started shooting at another motorist right in front of him while he sat in his undercover car. So just because you may not see a patrol car doesn't mean that we don't have resources in the neighborhood. One of the comments earlier that I didn't address, and I apologize for that, was the catalytic converters. We have undercover officers out. We have retail and the property crimes that are looking into that. So while we have seen some of those issues on East District, we have been able to follow up on some of those and have some success with undercover officers utilizing tactics that may not be as overt as people would expect to solve some of the crimes.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you're seeing undercover officers are probably not doing a very good job of being undercover. Once somebody asked, What can they do about repeated problems with noisy neighbors, noise complaints?
Yeah, we get that quite a lot. So obviously, the last thing that we want individuals to do is to confront a neighbor about a loud stereo and for something to go tragically wrong with that. Obviously, if that is a continued problem, um, call the non-emergency line 327-3811. If an individual is not getting the outcome that they think should occur, I would ask them to request that a supervisor be dispatched the next time to have that issue addressed at the supervisory level to ensure that we are taking every step possible to eliminate that nuisance complaint in the neighborhood. I know that can be very annoying, and that is one complaint that we get is loud music. So we try our best to address that, but that call may wait a little bit longer in the queue just because it is not a violent in progress run. So an officer will get to that as their time is freed up. But again, if that run needs to get dealt with a couple of times, I would usually tell someone to get a supervisor involved so we can ensure we're getting that addressed properly.
Can you explain CJIC? It's been in the news quite a bit recently. Can you explain what that is and the relationship that your East District officers and teams have in working with that team?
Yeah. So CJIC is an acronym that we use for the Crime Gun Intelligence Center. CJIC is a phenomenal resource and investigative tool that was developed internally here on IMPD that specifically deals with those individuals that are trigger pullers, those individuals that are convicted felons that are illegally possessing guns, and those individuals that sell weapons and have no business selling weapons due to their criminal background. So I have a permanent detail of an East District officer in the CJIC unit to ensure that East District crimes and East District gun arrests, specifically gun arrests of convicted felons, are immediately looked at and processed to ensure that we are presenting that case not only to the local prosecutor, but to the U.S. Attorney's Office to see if that particular arrest will be federal eligible. And we've had great success here on East District with our partnership and our detailed officer in CJIC in getting some very good convictions for those individuals that are illegally possessing weapons on East District.
Thank you, sir. That brings us to an end. We want to thank everybody for joining us. This is our third of 6 virtual community meetings. Before we finally wrap up, I'm going to pass it off to Assistant Chief of Police, Chris Bailey, for some closing comments. Chief?
Thanks, Lieutenant. First, I want to thank Commander Riddle and his entire team, the work they do each and every day to keep our East Side family members safe. And there's been a lot of good points made by Commander Riddle tonight during his presentation. We know that not every neighborhood, not every street, and certainly not every house in all these hot spots are filled with bad people. And that's why our focus over the last couple of years and going forward are on those small number of people, places, and behaviors responsible for the violence. And I have every confidence that Rick's team, working alongside our great friends on the East Side, are going to make a tremendous impact in 2021 going forward. I thank you all for coming here tonight to sit with us for a little while. We plan on doing more of these events, and hopefully we can get back in front of you face to face to reignite the relationships that have been lost because of the current pandemic situation we all find ourselves in. So thank you for being here tonight. God bless you, and we'll see you soon.